Before we get started with our brazing instructions, let's talk about what we have and why we have it. So first of all, we have our Porta-Torch HVAC torch kit. That includes a nice plastic carrying case, a long hose kit with a torch assembly, two regulators, an oxygen regulator and an acetylene regulator, and two replaceable tips, a number 1 and a number 3. Those will be interchangeable depending on what size copper you're trying to braze. There in front we have our safety gear, which is a pair of safety glasses and some good thin leather gloves. The biggest problem we have with safety is burns, because we're getting copper really hot, and so we want to try to protect ourselves. Back in the back we have our oxygen and acetylene tanks. You'll see the acetylene is always the small tank and the oxygen is the larger. The Porta-Torch kit is sized to perfectly fit those, so you won't have to get those mixed up. We have a fire extinguisher that hopefully we never have to use, but just in case we do need it, we want to have it readily available. Then we've got our brazing rods. We are not soldering, we are brazing. So these require a phosphorus copper silver brazing rod. And then we have a can of fire and ice, which is a heat stop, so that we can protect the things that we don't want to get hot that might be near our brazing point. We've got a large crescent wrench. That's going to be for connecting the regulators to the tanks. We do not want to use channel locks. That will destroy your regulators very quickly. We have a service valve tool. That's going to be for opening and closing primarily your acetylene tank. We have a striker for lighting your torches. We don't want to use a lighter. I have a mirror for inspecting your braze joints that you have to look to the bottom side, and the mirror really comes in handy. I have a small tubing cutter that will go up to 1 1/8 inch. And then I've got a service valve tool that does, in this case, is just a pocket screwdriver with a service valve removal tool on the back. And then we have some sandpaper or emery cloth, and that's for cleaning our joints before we get started brazing. For assembling our torch kit, we're just going to go ahead and start from scratch. So we've got our handle that includes our adjustment knobs for red acetylene, green for oxygen. But we have our burner, which threads onto the end of our handle. We're just going to get that roughly tight right now. Then I'm going to take our number 1 torch tip, and we're just going to thread that. Make sure we don't cross thread it. We're going to thread that into the head of our burner. Now, we want to get that fairly snug, but we always want to start with the torch pointing away from us, because this is where we're going to be using our torch with the adjustment knobs pointing toward us. So of course we don't want that torch spraying out toward us. We want that shooting away from us, and so that's where we should end up looking. And then we just want this, it's gasketed, so we don't need to put any tools on that or you will destroy the gasket. So that's just something you want to get pretty snug, finger tight. Now that we have our torch head assembled, we want to go ahead and connect the hoses. So the hoses are color coded for red for acetylene and green for oxygen. Now one thing that you will notice on the connecting nuts is that there is a little line in the middle of the acetylene. What that is indicating is that it is a reverse thread connection. And so when we go to tighten that up, it's actually backwards. So we're going to turn left to tighten that one. Confusing. Have to think backwards. And then the green oxygen is just a standard thread, so we're going to turn that right to get it tight. Now these we do want, loosen it up, wasn't thinking backwards. We do want to take a wrench and get these tight. So I'm going to take our crescent wrench and tighten that acetylene or oxygen. And then again, we're backwards on the acetylene. So I'm going to tighten that acetylene. we are connected to our torch assembly. Now we're going to connect our regulators. Again, color coded, green is oxygen, red is acetylene. On our regulators, they keep you from messing that up by giving you two different sizes on the connectors that connect to the tank. So the larger of the two connectors is for oxygen, the smaller of the two is for acetylene, and they have the same size connection for the hoses. So we'll go ahead and hook the hoses up first. I'm going to start with the oxygen regulator. So I'm going to take my green hose. Again, standard threads. So we're just going to get that tight finger first, then take our crescent wrench and get that tightened. We'll get our acetylene regulator. Again, the notch along the middle indicates that it's a reverse thread. So we're going to go left to tighten that. And we'll take our crescent wrench. Get that tight and snug. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get our regulators attached to our tanks. I went ahead and put the tanks in the holder. So the larger oxygen, and it does say oxygen here, goes on the right hand side, and the smaller acetylene fits snugly into the left hand side. So we're going to go ahead and take our regulators. I'm going to hook up the acetylene first, and the first thing I noticed on this acetylene is that we're loose here. So anytime that we're getting ready to hook up, we want to make sure everything is tight and leak free. So I'm going to go ahead and get that tightened into the regulator before we hook it up. So this one does not have the line through the middle, so that's a standard thread size. So we're going to go right or clockwise to tighten that up. We're just going to tighten that by finger, hand tight to starting, so that we don't get it cross-threaded. So we want to tighten that till it gets snug. We'll tighten both up with the crescent wrench here in a moment. Same thing with the oxygen. We're going to hook that up and hand tighten that 90% of the way till it gets snug. And then we'll take our crescent wrench and get both of these. These we want to be tight. We do not want these to leak, so I'm going to put some pretty good weight on these to make sure that they don't leak. It'll be a little tricky to get to this acetylene for the video, but I'll go ahead and reach over. We want that one tight as well. Oh, just got that loose again. Okay. So once we're finished, we want to make sure that everything is not in a bind. We can see our gauges, we can get to our adjustments, and now we have a torch assembly that is ready to use.